I'm Mark Romano, Director of Business Development of NYSTEC. We are an independent nonprofit management and technology consulting firm who does predominantly most of our businesses in the public sector.
Hi, I'm Ariella Tortsenko, and I'm the Executive Manager of the New York iCore Hub, where we run entrepreneurial training programs and courses. I work with high-tech innovators, academic researchers, and community entrepreneurs to provide a wide variety of initiatives to help support their next steps.
I'm Nick Deramo. I'm an architect, and my company is Deramo Architect. We work on high-end residential projects in New York, Florida, and various areas throughout the country.
All right, so let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back in time to 2020. It's COVID. It's all over the news. Nick, I'm going to start with you. When did you first become aware that COVID is likely to come to America, but also impact the way that you do business?
It was, I guess, we heard about it at the beginning of the year, and I felt like, I know for us, March, I think 13th is the day that where everything sort of shut down in New York. But just about leading up to that was kind of when I was like, okay, this is something that's happening. I just didn't know really where it was going to go until the 13th, when it was like, let's just shut down. So that was kind of like when I was like, all right, this is real.
Did that change anything for you immediately when you first?
Well, I mean, yeah, all my projects in New York stopped, like 100%. Like, didn't slow down, they just stopped. So everything kind of had to be, first of all, you tell your clients where are we, what does this mean for us? Where are we going? People have homes they need to get into. So it was very tricky on how to just deal with sort of their concerns, right? Because I didn't know what was going on. So that was kind of the hard part. But I think, working with the client and working with the contractors and different people in the networks, that you sort of understood and we could help each other out, how to ease each other and how to make the best of this situation. So that's sort of the beginning.
Ariella, how about you?
So we were running our standard training courses in person for a long time. And in the beginning of March, we had a notice from our program director saying, hey, your upcoming final lessons learned presentations finale, it's got to become virtual. And so we had to figure out how to tell 25 teams that were participating in this cohort to cancel all their travel plans and to be able to pivot to present virtually. So there were a number of challenges there and a lot of solutions that had to be come up in quite a time crunch. So that was one big pivot, as well as another upcoming course that was coming up in partnership with SUNY Albany, where we had decided to have a cohort in person and had teams that were expecting to come. And now there was this big pandemic and the people had to stay online. So we had to figure out how to transition this curriculum to be in a virtual setting.
Mark, what about you?
I'll tell you, it was a lot of uncertainty. It was a little scary, right? Nobody really knew what was happening. I think I sort of first started paying attention probably in January of that year. I live upstate, but I spent a lot of time here in downstate. Downstate, there was getting much more attention with the COVID news, and so I was kind of taking this local news back to my friends and family upstate and saying, there's something here. We probably need to be paying attention to this. And so I think from a NYSTEC perspective, we were really early on to recognize that there was something that was coming. And so we started to put in place a wellness committee to help our employees determine what types of health issues they should be aware of and the things they should be monitoring. We ordered thermometers, we ordered masks early on. We started to pay close attention. A lot of our clients are in the healthcare community, and so we were talking with our clients and specifically the State Department of Health about the things that they were hearing. So, but we were very concerned. Our business model is that we sit on site with our clients, and we were very concerned. Like, what is that going to look like? What's going to happen on March 13th? What's that? March 16th, I think 17th, right? Yeah. St. Patty's Day is when a lot of things just completely shut down.
Right.
So it was there was a lot of uncertainty. It was scary. We weren't quite sure what was happening, but we were getting ready for it. So
I think the immediate impact is most people started remote work for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So once it becomes clear everyone's going to have to stay at home and it's going to be probably for an extended period of time, did you have any instinct about how long the pandemic might last, or the lockdown? Excuse me, the lockdown might last, and did that make you change any decisions that you guys were thinking about for 2020?
Well, it wasn't supposed to be 10 days, and
14 days,
14 days to change the world, right? Flatten the curve. Yeah, everyone stay home for 2 weeks and we'll be fine. So, we realized, I think, early on that it was going to likely be extended, and so we started really talking to our clients. We had a number of issues initially with getting people the resources that they need to be at home. But fortunately, we also had done a little bit of remote work before, and so we were prepared. I think to a certain degree, we had everybody has laptops. There's nobody that has desktops necessarily anymore in our company. So we had some capability to be remote. The issue was our clients and what they were going to do and what they needed. So that was probably the biggest challenge. Is like in those early weeks, kind of figuring that out, what they needed. Health department folks, we're continuing to go on site. We do work in public safety down here, FDNY. They're going on site, so we had to figure out how to support them without jeopardizing the health of our employees. So,
Ariella, what about you? Is there any business decisions that you forego because you realized the pandemic was likely to last much longer than you anticipated?
Yeah, there were so many opportunities that had to be changed. And even with our programming, the biggest challenge was the curriculum really focused on customer discovery, to ask our entrepreneurs to go out and test their business hypotheses through face-to-face interviews. And it was a real shock to train our instructors and mentors on how to now approach this subject of talking to people, not only from the getting these stakeholder interviews, but actually conducting them in a new setting on this virtual landscape. So there were a lot of shifts, and this virtual environment also created trouble of being able to manage numerous different platforms and being able to communicate to different variety of people in their team and with the instructors. So there were a lot of hurdles that we had to pivot in our programming.
Nick, you are a resident entrepreneur here. So for you, what did the pandemic mean for your business?
So I mean, it was tricky. I mean, luckily I was just an employee of one at the time, so I was kind of in a weird way in a decent situation to deal with the pandemic that was slowing down. But being based in New York, like I said, all my projects that were under construction stopped, right? So having the virtual interaction is fine, but you can't do construction virtually. You have to be in person. You have to be on site. People have to be around, and work with each other. So the biggest thing was that I was lucky that I had projects in other states, not outside of the city. Therefore, I actually ended up going and relocating in Florida for 2 months because I had projects down there that were actually still moving forward. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was kind of a big change. I relocated for temporarily, so that was a big moment. But it allowed me to kind of be able to keep doing what I do, keep working, keep my projects moving forward, and creating income for myself. Mm-hmm.
So one of the challenges we heard, you had to move to another state just to be able to continue business. Yeah. Were there other challenges or barriers that you faced as you were starting your business? Sorry, not starting your business, but I guess trying to grow it during the height of the pandemic.
Well, the thing was, the scary part was, because construction after, I would say the beginning of the pandemic, it was very slow. And then, 6 to 8 months, people started relocating, buying homes. So this all of a sudden construction took, and the housing market took a big turn, which for me was, I guess, a positive thing, right? So the scariest part was, is this a time to grow my business of one, right? My company of one, right? So is this a time to grow? Is this time to take a chance and expand, get an office space when everyone's doing the opposite? You know what I mean? So it was kind of tricky for me, but it's what I did and what I needed to do to sort of just figure out how to grow in the pandemic, but looking forward and after the pandemic. So
did that uncertainty ever make you think maybe I should not be an entrepreneur? Maybe I should go back to work for somebody else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was terrifying. It truly was. It was, like I said, good thing I was just an employee of one, and my overhead was very minimal, so I could grind it out for a while, but there was times where I know I had other friends and colleagues who do the same thing that I do, but work for bigger companies, and were able to sort of have an easier time just dealing with it, or not even having to deal with it. Their companies were dealing with it. So I'm like, do I go back to that and make my life easier, or do I sort of keep pushing for this and just stick to the plan?
So Mark, I'm going to ask you, what was the biggest need for NYSTEC during the pandemic, and how was that different from maybe pre-pandemic?
Biggest need, but again, there was so much uncertainty surrounding what our clients were going to be doing, and we kind of followed our clients' lead on a lot of things. They were super busy. The state health department was super busy trying to figure it out. But I think our biggest concern, I guess maybe it's not a need, our biggest concern was we didn't know if some contracts were going to get canceled. The state was trying to figure out funding. They figured that they're going to have less tax receipts, that they were trying to pinch their budgets. And so we did get a couple of letters from some clients saying, hey, please stop work. until further notice. And so that started to cascade a little bit within the first, couple of weeks, within the first month or so. We got a couple of those, and we were like, okay, how many more of these letters we can receive? So we really started to do more outreach to our clients, talk to them about their concerns, talk to them about how we can help them. So I think that was probably our biggest concern is not knowing which projects might be canceled, and keeping our folks safe, healthy, and certainly busy. So that was probably our biggest area of concern.
Ariel, how about you? For your organization, what was the biggest need from your perspective?
So it was actually a great pivot that we had to change our courses to become virtual, because there was a huge need for community-based entrepreneurs to get business training. And there was a huge increase in the amount of participants and people in the ecosystem that had this time, this flexibility to now be able to participate in innovation-based recovery programming to help start their own business. So there was a huge gap that we were able to fill with our programming to be able to serve a larger community.
Nick, was there anything about your business model that changed besides moving to Florida from New York?
I would say that there wasn't too much that changed, but I was able to focus on certain things that maybe before weren't as important to me, right? Like the not so glamorous side of being an architect is, I was, again, company of one. So I'm doing the bookkeeping, I'm doing everything that's sort of, keeping track of, my time and all those things. So I think the biggest thing was sort of focusing on that and becoming more efficient, one, in the need, because I wasn't sure when my money was going, when it was coming in, but also it's, that's going to benefit me, in the future for sure. So that was sort of the biggest thing that I was able to focus on, certain items that I wasn't that focused on previously. And
so it sounds like when you started, you were one, and now you have multiple employees?
Yeah, I have a couple employees now. And which is also scary.
So when you're a person of one, it's easy to kind of figure out what's your revenue. When it's multiple people, at what point did you realize that in order to maintain growth, you're going to have to bring more people on?
It was probably a year after the pandemic sort of started, that March date. That's when sort of more of the projects started to flow in, and it was either I had to turn projects down, which I didn't want to do because I, trying to build something. That's the ultimate goal, but now we're in a pandemic, so I got to figure out what's the balance. So it was either turn projects away or get people to help me. And that's what I decided to do. I feel like I just need to get people to help, and this will hopefully pay off in the long run.
Mark, so the pandemic's dragging on. It's months and months and months. Did you get a sense that COVID was going to create a new normal for NYSTEC in the way that we conducted business from how we used to do it?
Yeah, I think by the end of 2020, December 2020, I think we realized that there was a shift that was happening in the workplace, that it was here, the new normal. I know everyone was saying that, but I think we recognized that we had to be different. We had to think differently about how we serve our clients. We had to think differently about how we get in business. I'm a traditional business development, person where I like to go face to face and shake hands and meet people, and it wasn't possible for the first 18 months, 2 years. So we had to think of different ways we could get of our clients, different ways we can introduce ourselves to potential clients, and so we definitely realized that things were shifting, and so we tried to put policies into place that would reflect sort of the flexible work environment. We still invested in our facilities. We opened this new office up here earlier this year. We recognize that there is still a need for physical space, and some days they're pretty full, and some days they're not. But we're empowering our employees to make the right decisions to be where they need to be in order to be effective, and still some of it's driven by our clients as well. So clients sometimes demand that we're on site with them, and so we have to adjust, and we have to service them accordingly. So
yeah, I think having worked for NYSTEC, I feel like it didn't really change that much per like the investments that we're going to make, but I think it kind of accelerated the types of investments that we were going to have to make in employees and making sure we could hire and recruit. So it makes sense to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, it certainly did. And we were, as a technology company, we invest heavily in technology for ourselves. And so we had a lot of the systems and technologies already in place. But you're right, it did accelerate. We had to invest more. We had to make sure we had the latest. We had to make sure that our employees had the things at home that they can continue to be effective at. So we were mostly, pretty good, pretty well set up to support full-time remote work. But there were still a lot of things that we had to do.
Ariella, how about you? Any new normal investments that you felt like you had to make in order to kind of accommodate what was now going to be the way that business was going to be done in the future?
Yeah, it was by summer 2020 that we realized this is going to take a while. And so we really had to get good at our virtual programming to serve our clients. And it was really interesting to note the shift that happened, that now there was a variety of participants that formerly didn't become entrepreneurs because of the restrictions that there were in day-to-day life. Now moms with children could log in and get this training program, or the people with 9 to 5 jobs with that hustle and grit were able to now experience the uncertainty of starting a business and being able to participate. So we realized that we had an opportunity to help drive technology driven innovation through entrepreneurship. So we actually created a new program called the Gotham Innovation Gambit, which scaled our participants from not only high-tech academic researchers, but community researchers that have these backyard inventions and want to start a company and just really needed to learn some of the lingo and the resources that are available to them in the great state of New York.
So it sounds like COVID allowed you to kind of recruit new people to your programs that maybe you previously wouldn't have been able to come because it's all in person. For you, was there any new clients that you were able to kind of go after because now everything's virtual and it seemed to open up?
I would say that yes, it forced me actually to sort of go after different clients. Well, less for sort of because of the virtual aspect of it, but more because like I said, New York, I was focused more on New York City apartments, and then I realized once that all closed down that this is only like the niche that I'm in. I need to expand a little bit so that way I can, when things in New York aren't going well, things in Florida could go okay, or things in the suburbs can go, differently. So I think less on focusing on a way to get the clients, but also who the clients are. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, is trying to just diversify the projects.
Do you think that NYSTEC has had the pandemic has had an impact on the types of employees that we can recruit from do they live in Albany, Rome, or New York City, to maybe they live other places?
Sure. Like a lot of companies, we've sort of opened up our recruiting. We've always, we're traditionally New York State based. We have offices in upstate and downstate. Our clients are predominantly within state of New York boundaries. And so we've always sort of hired locally. Pandemic obviously has opened things up quite a bit. So it's not necessarily a panacea. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to automatically grow and find the most talented folks. There's a lot of challenges that go with that too.
Right.
You have to register your business in other states if you hire somebody. There's a lot of paperwork and money and costs and things you have to do. So it's not a complete game changer necessarily, but it certainly opened us up to thinking, hey, we don't necessarily need somebody that lives in the 518 area code or the 315 area code. We can pretty much go anywhere within reason and bring in the best talent. So
yeah, I would say I would add to that on my end is that, it's also good for the clients to understand, my clients to understand that, I don't have to be necessarily in your state or in your area to have, a productive meeting or to have a sort of, a design crib together, right? We can still be there virtually and, I can get there when I can, but for the majority of the project, I could be somewhere else. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for us was sort of training our clients that was acceptable.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, our clients, particularly in the government side, they're traditional. They need to be in their offices.
Yes.
That's how they're used to conducting business. And so we had to bring them along. Like, we can continue to support you. We can continue to do excellent work. Just because we're not sitting down in the same conference room together, we still have the tools to do the work that we need to do in order to make it successful. That was the biggest challenge for us, is getting our clients to accept the fact that we didn't have to be in the same room.
All right, I'm going to ask you, at any point during the pandemic, did you see a specific void in the marketplace or something, a niche, a gap that you could fill with the services that you're offering?
I would say just because of the size of my firm is that I was able to take on, maybe some of the smaller projects where people were leaving the city, people were, buying homes in the suburbs, and they didn't want to build a new home. They didn't want to renovate a complete home, but they needed a home office now. They needed somewhere to sort of work with their kids, or they're having babies, things like that. So I was able to take on some of those smaller projects that maybe some of the bigger firms don't really want to do. So I felt like that was a nice way to kind of just also, get more clients, but just a bigger network. So
You kind of talked a little bit about attracting new types of partners that might come to your programs. Were there other types of voids or gaps, opportunities for growth for your organization?
There were opportunities for serving as a connector
Mhm.
and master networker between the opportunities and resources. So a lot of our incubators and accelerators in the network had no clue how to pivot to a virtual setting or how to adapt to their clients' new needs in this new normal where who is really the expert in the market and to be able to navigate through it. So we were able to help some of our partners create new programming in a new environment, which really helped create a stronger ecosystem. You know, this is the place for world-class universities, high-tech incubators, and a variety of different venture and non-diluted funding resources.
So there's a duality to COVID, right? Because we haven't really talked about that when we're not going to the sadness of COVID, right? Because it's a tragedy that happened and it affected hundreds of thousands, not millions of people. But were there positive changes or outcomes that you found COVID brought to NYSTEC that you still think are really important?
Yeah, I think we really take the time to connect with people more now. Whereas maybe we took it for granted that we would see them on occasion in the office. We have to be meaningful about the interactions that we have. We have to be more thoughtful about that. We have to make sure that we reach out to folks. We have to make sure that we communicate, better with each other. And I think that that's been really positive. I also like the sort of the added benefit of the more relaxed work environment, more flexible work environment. So you take some of those stresses, I think, away, and it's okay to work at home now.
Right.
We always sort of had some element of working kind of where you needed to work, but it was sort of the exception rather than the rule. And now we have that flexibility. If it's a bad snowstorm, I don't have to white knuckle it in the office unless there's a real reason for me to be there. If there's a childcare issue, mother or father doesn't have to worry about dealing with it. They can balance that. It's more acceptable to do that. So I still think that there's a need to be in the office and in front of the clients, but it's just I think it's an added benefit to be able to be we're okay with doing that.
So you have to be more intentional, right?
More intentional about everything. Yeah, about everything. So. Yeah.
What about you?
Absolutely. We had to shift the whole tone of how we would deliver feedback to our participants on their business model. It didn't help being a jerk in a new virtual setting. So there was a lot of shift in the language that we had to take and really being accommodating to people's situations and inspiring and encouraging them that they could do that really hard thing of starting a business. So tone was a major awakening for us, and reducing the barriers to entry really served to be a critical component. There were nuances in these application processes that were preventing people from participating in entrepreneurial programming because they felt, well, oh, I'm not this or I'm not that. But the whole point was being that we'll teach you and give you the toolkits to succeed. So there was a major positive trend in the right direction.
So employee engagement becomes a pretty big priority for a lot of companies to deal with, making sure people know how to cope with stress, and work-life balance becomes an idiom that people use every day now in work. Nick, as someone who started as an entrepreneur by yourself and then had to hire people, how did you start to work to kind of incorporate cultural aspects and how you manage your employees?
Well, I think that, kind of what you were saying before about like sort of, in appreciating the interactions with people and your relationships. I think for me, again, even still having a small company, the network is super important to someone like me, right? So people that either, whether it's friends or it's people in the business or not necessarily architects, but, contractors and people that I interact with all the time. And early on in the pandemic, that was a huge part of it for me to sort of, to have those interactions and someone to bounce ideas off of and ask questions to. And, with the employees that I have now, it's kind of that same idea is that, we always want to just keep branching out our network and just keep making sure that we know what everybody else is up to. And if we need something, we can reach out to other people. It doesn't have to be inside the office.
Mark, were there any tricks of the trade, anything you did to kind of encourage staff along as COVID drags on and people are starting to get a little burned out? Are there anything that you would offer up to employees or your colleagues to help them stay engaged?
Free lunches, always good, right? That always works when you bribe.
There's no such thing as a free
very early on, again, it gets back to sort of the intentionality of how you had to conduct your business. I would make phone calls, constantly just checking in. How you doing? Everything okay? So replace that sort of water cooler, interaction. Again, be more meaningful. Use the camera. Turn the camera on. And get used to being in front of the camera because it's so nice to have. If you can't be in person, it's so nice to be able to pull them up.
We definitely increased our usage of online communication through Slack, and it turned out to be team building to be able to have that virtual connection with each other. And it was interesting because people became more flexible. People were able to change the 9 to 5 lifestyle to now be, well, I'll do it until 3 and then I got to pick up my kids, but I'll come home and I'll check my email again and answer. So there was a huge way in how we communicate became more natural in some ways, even though it had shifted to a new setting.
So we talked about how do we how do we help our colleagues cope, but how did you cope? Was there anything that you podcast, anybody you turn to for advice as you're going through starting your own business, but hiring people, growing?
Yeah, I think, kind of what I was saying before is like the network. For someone who was just one person, the network was really big to me. I had created a network that allowed me to sort of go on my own and create my own company. And that was the time where I had to go back and reach out to all those people and just check in and see what's going on and how they were doing, and what I could do differently, how I could help them, and how they could help me. So that was sort of a big part of it. I mean, just there was a number of people, but yeah, I think that's for someone with a small company, that's like a big deal, is the network that you have.
Mark, you're on the leadership team, so did you start to look to your leadership colleagues to help kind of guide you when you're just like, I don't know what's going on here? Help me. You seen the same thing?
Yeah, we communicated a lot. In fact, we have our standard sort of executive weekly meeting is every Monday morning for an hour and a half. We all meet and talk about whatever's important for the company that we have to do. During COVID, we had 3 check-ins a week. They weren't as long. We had a regular meeting, and then we had the check-in on Wednesday morning and then the check-in on Friday morning. It's just hey, how's everything going? What are you hearing? How's your teams doing? What are you hearing from clients? Everybody okay? Does everybody have everything they need? Here's the latest that we're hearing. Let's disseminate this information out to our team. So again, being intentional and deliberate, and we recognized after a few weeks that we needed to communicate more frequently, and so we set it on our calendars and we made sure that we had opportunities to connect with each other, and to be there for our employees and make sure that we're being responsive to their needs, their requests, their challenges, their fears, and do everything we can to communicate that. So, Ariella, how about you?
It was important for us to keep programming going and to keep consistency in what we were offering, and being able to assess the lessons learned and best practices that came out of each of those, because the environment did keep changing and the needs of the entrepreneurs did keep evolving. So we did try to stay aware of, well, this exercise online didn't look the same way as when we asked people to mark Post-its in person on a whiteboard. And there was a lot of adapting that needed to be done, but consistency was key.
All right. So before we get to looking forward to post-pandemic, is there any last lessons learned that anyone wants to share at all?
4 years ago, you had said, hey, there's going to be this major global pandemic and you're going to shut down and you're not going to, go out of doors for months at a time. I've been like, wow, that's crazy. So I think that's really opened our eyes that we have to be ready for anything. We have to be prepared. We have to, be ready for the unexpected. I think that's the most important thing to take from this.
COVID part 2, hopefully, right?
No.
All right, go ahead.
I think people wanted to have more meaning to their work, and so there was a drastic change in the way people wanted their work to look like, their personal life. So there was a lot of room for exploration and doing what you love, which was excellent.
Yeah, I think kind of on that a little bit is just, with now having employees too, it is sort of the work life, versus personal life, and how you can now virtually come in and check in and do what you need to do. I think just keeping people happy, letting them sort of have the flexibility to do what they need to do in their personal life, but also still, be productive at work.
So looking forward, were there any changes that you made during COVID that you now realize I'm going to have to scale that back a little bit because it doesn't make sense in this new market?
In terms of a
Client, it could be anything about how we do business.
Yeah, I think, again, it gets back to, being more intentional about the things that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Time is, precious. Everybody, says that, but be more intentional about it. Be more deliberate. Take time to think through the things that you're trying to accomplish. Put together a plan.
I believe we will be more in a hybrid environment and be experimenting with the delivery and the channel of how these entrepreneurial training courses will operate. And I think we will start increasing our in-person events and being able to create those meaningful connections in person, because once they meet in person or at an event one time or network, you can always take it online. But it's very hard to start that first initial fostering relationship when it was a one-touch online in a larger environment. So being able to provide networking opportunities is going to be critical to continue the founder whisper network and the engagement of all the participants that are being trained up?
I would say that honestly, I don't think there's much that I will have to scale back or want to scale back. I think the pandemic actually kind of forced my hand into being a better business owner and forced me to learn a lot of things really quickly.
Right.
So I think that looking back at it, it forced me to be better at what I do, to be honest.
All right, so the last question. So let's just pretend post-COVID, the pandemic is nearly over. Public health emergencies are probably going to be undeclared at some point in 2023. At least that's the hope. Is there anything that you're looking forward to in the coming year that wasn't probably possible maybe the last 2 years, but now you feel like might be possible in 2023 or 2024?
I think we're already doing some of those things,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I feel like to a certain degree, we're almost back to, the new normal, right? We're gathering, we're
Holiday
meeting in
parties.
person, we have holiday parties, restaurants are full, we're having, people come into our offices, we're having offsite meetings, with large gatherings. I think we're there. I'm looking forward to 2023 for it to really become settled in and become truly the new normal, a way of doing business. So I think we're almost there. I'm excited for 2023.
So less changing, more settling into the things
Yeah,
that
I'm comfortable with the new model. I think,
Yeah,
right? I mean, and I'm sort of a traditionalist. Be in the office 5 days a week kind of person. I've come off that. I think there's a lot of value in being able to have that flexibility. I'm a proponent of it. I think it's important. And again, to get back to being deliberate, we have this flexible work policy here at NYSTEC. That means be in the office when you need to be, and it means you can be wherever else you want when it makes sense as well, right? So there's no set days, no set times. Whatever works for you, your team, your clients is fine. So I really try to embrace that. I don't know if you picked up on this, but I try to be very deliberate. Like there's an all company meeting where I'm going to speak at. Right. Sometimes I might take it at home because I want to model the behavior that we've established. It's not just me and there's Mark in the office again. He's always in the office, but he's preaching, he's saying, flexible workspace. No, I believe in it. So there's times where I'm deliberate. You'll see me at home when there's an all company meeting because I want folks to see that it's okay. When it makes sense, you can be at home. So I think that's important going forward as well.
How about you? Anything in 2023, 2024 you're looking forward to?
Looking forward to more expos and conferences and attending these events that are of such large scale to really bring in people I don't know and thought leaders and change makers that are talking about interesting things ahead. It was so strange during COVID. Everyone didn't know who was the expert in anything anymore because everything had just changed. And so now people are becoming more flexible, as you mentioned, and being able to allow for new ideas and things that we've never thought of before because we were stuck in our rigid ways of it had to be done this way or had to be done that way. And now there's flexibility to experiment with different models of learning and different ways of communicating and being together with people. And that's what entrepreneurship is about, to be able to adapt to new environments. So looking forward to attending events again in person.
Those are the fun things, though. Like, you get to kind of embrace the things that were fun about being in person, which is like events and networking, and then you get to kind of like all the things where it's like a Monday morning and I don't want to go in the office at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I think like what Mark was saying is I feel like, especially in my industry, we're kind of in it. We're kind of living it now. I think that there's very minimal sort of restrictions that we have currently. So I think 2023 would be really just like said, embracing the new normal and accepting it as the normal now, not the new normal. It's just the normal. So I think that's what I'm looking for.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick, Ariella, Mark. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Great discussion.